It's almost the end of September, and we still haven't talked about my August reads. We're gonna fix that. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Alyssa. I am very behind on like regular scheduled content. I've been so excited filming you guys like all these little mini reviews and all these other things. I forgot that like the basis of a booktube channel is to talk about the books that we've read like en masse. Like there's staple videos of booktube that I haven't been filming because I've been distracted by other videos to film for you guys. And it's time for us to talk about my August reads. We had Women in Translation. It's one of my favorite reading months of the year, next to like spooky season. And I have a bunch of stuff to tell you guys about. So I liked the format of last time. So this time we're going to go through all the books I read just very briefly, minus my 6 notable reads from the month, which are 6 books that I really want to highlight for you guys. Before we do all that, I will go through my stats because I use Storygraph because I hate Goodreads so much. So we're going to go through my Storygraph stats from August so that we can see what my reading breakdown looked like. And then we'll talk about those notable reads. We'll get through everything. I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm still constantly distracted by my viewfinder. Let's talk about my stats. I read 25 books in the month of August, and that was 8,128 whole pages. That's a lot of pages to read in 1 month. Again, per usual, the moods are the same: reflective, dark, emotional, mysterious, tense. It takes a long time until we get to like funny, lighthearted, happy things. Happy things are not high on my list when I'm reading. We know this. My pace is always about the same, medium. Still don't know what this pacing is. If you're slow, you're slow. If you're fast, you're fast. Everything else is medium, right? I mean, tell me if you understand pacing better than that. I did read some big chunky books, one of which we're going to talk about, but for the most part, everything was under 300 pages. I find that translated works tend to be shorter, like the majority of them. Obviously, there's long translated works that are maybe over 300 pages, but for the most part, I think most of these books tend to be very short, and I don't know why. But if anybody else sees that when they're reading translated works or has noticed that, let me know, because I've definitely noticed it. That seems to be a trend. I did read a little nonfiction. What I read that was nonfiction, I'm not 100% sure right now, but we'll get into that. And these are my genre breakdowns for the month. It's pretty standard stuff, mostly literary and contemporary, but we added in some horror, some thriller, some fantasy, sci-fi. That's all sort of normal stuff to be up at the top. I will tell you, and we're going to cover this in my noble reads, but just look, if you look down at the bottom, there's a little thing that says manga right there. I think we're going to watch that bar get a little bigger. I feel like that bar is going to keep growing, because if you didn't see my most recent video, or one of my most recent videos where I talked about how manga is my midlife crisis and I need help with finding more manga, I think we're going to see that bar get bigger. So that is everything. That's kind of like the statistics, the smart person, the breakdown of the month. Let's talk about my August reads. I think this is 20 however many books. There's always a discrepancy, it seems like, between Bookly and Storygraph, and I don't know why. Generally speaking, this is everything I read. I've blacked out the books that are on my notables, so you guys can't see what those are. And we're going to start right here at the top with The Hole by Hee Young Pyun. This was a very short sort of horror novel that I already did a breakdown on. I also did a breakdown of the next book on this list, Sisters by Daisy Johnson. These books are gothic. Well, Sisters is very gothic. The Hole is very just like literary thriller horror, and they're both great. They're both wonderful. They both touch on grief. The Whole is like you're just watching this train wreck, where everything's going, but you just want to see it get there because it's just crazy. You have a man in a coma and who wakes up, and now he's like mostly paraplegic, quadriplegic, but he can like move like an arm or something. He slowly gets some function back, but he can't really talk. He can't do anything for himself, and he's with his crazy mother-in-law. It's gold. Sisters is about a mother and her daughters, and there's definitely a tragic event that's occurring, but you don't know exactly what occurs, and it's slowly getting revealed to you throughout the story. It's got good suspenseful gothic vibes. Totally enjoyed it. Next up is Pizza Girl by Jean Kyung Fraser, and this was not a bad book. This was a book that Naomi said I would really, really love. And there's just something missing for me with Pizza Girl. I don't know what it was, but you have like a troubled sort of teen. She gets infatuated with this woman that she delivers pizza to, and she like makes up an entire like sort of relationship in her head. It's sort of obsessive. It's a weird book. It's a sad book. It's a dark book. It's a really messed up book. I don't know. Just something didn't click. Like, it was fine. Like, I guess it was fine. Some of the translated books I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because Naomi and I do break them down in an upcoming or just out episode. I don't know when this is going up. We do break down our women in translation reads in an episode for TBR Lamb podcast. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Or you can always check it out here, the uncut video. I read Mieko Kawakami's All the Lovers in the Night, which is her most recent release. She wrote Breast and Eggs in Heaven and Mr. Ice Sandwich, or Mrs. Ice Sandwich, Somebody Ice Sandwich. I haven't read that one yet. Those are the only books that have been translated so far, and that's the only one I haven't read of her translated works. All the Lovers in the Night is like a novella. You follow a woman that is very sad, very introverted, and her kind of issues with just generally people. She has a drinking problem. She meets a man. It's a very interesting look at like what is it like to be a woman in business? What does it mean to be like really, really lonely? It's a very good book. It's not my favorite, but it was a very, very good book. The next one I did not enjoy, Memory of Water. It started off really strong. I was really into this like weird Japanese, almost adjacent sci-fi, literary sci-fi, where there's like water is a really precious source and like something has happened. There's like political intrigue. And then it just never really met the beginning promise. Like what was promised in the beginning as a really good book was just never really completed by the end of the book. So it just felt bleh. Have you read Memory of Water? Let me know how you feel about it, because like I don't know. I read The Never King by Nikki St. Crow, because sometimes you just need a little reverse heroine in your life. I need to continue on with the series, but I also, while I was reading it, I was thinking about how weird it is that like we are sexualizing Peter Pan, because that is like a cartoon that I watched as a child. And also like Peter Pan is like the Grim Reaper basically, and he comes and collects dead children. So like Peter Pan is kind of yeah, I get that he's kind of a bad character, but like also why am I like okay watching what is essentially an evolved version of a childhood cartoon character railing some chick and all the Lost Boys joining it. Anyway, but I'm not gonna lie, for whatever that says about my mental health, I really enjoyed it. Freshwater for Flowers was really, really good. This is a book that my mother kept telling me I needed to read, and I hadn't read it yet. So I picked it up for Women in Translation because it's translated from French. It's a very like complexly woven story about how all these people in this book intertwine, how their lives intertwine. Your main character tends to a cemetery, and so there's a lot of discussion about like grief and loss and letting go and the secrets we keep while we're alive that get revealed when we're dead and all that. But then at its core, there's this mystery about like how her daughter died. It's a really, really well done book. It's very interesting. Next, I have Self-Portrait in Green, which is a super teeny tiny book that is sort of a literary memoir where all the people in the author's life are like somehow dressed in green. Like everything has to go back to green. I don't know. I mean, I think I want to try some other stuff this author has written, but it wasn't like my favorite book, if that makes any sense. Then there's Trust, which I read with Dee Dee Reads and her like reading the Booker book club, where you read a different Booker long listed book every month. So this was the first book for that. This is not shortlisted, but this was interesting. This gave me To Paradise vibes in its structure. It's 3 different stories, but the stories are way more connected than To Paradise is. So it's a little bit easier to read and it's more straightforward how you feel about it. The first story is a fictional story about a financier and his wife who goes insane. And the second story is the memoir of this financier, sort of in response to that fictionalized book about his life. And the third book is the financier enlisting this woman to write his story. No, wait. Yeah, to write his story. Sorry, I got so confused. To write his story and her research into what happened, and then it's the past when she was doing it with him, and then in her present when she gets the opportunity to actually read the wife's journals, and then we kind of get the secrets of the story revealed at the end. It was fine. It was good. I liked what it was trying to do. There were things about it that didn't quite work for me. There's things where I feel like there should have been more explanation. We had a really good book club discussion about that. So on that level, I think it's a fantastic book club pick because there's a lot to talk about in here and there's a lot to dissect. So that was fantastic. We don't need to talk about Dead Inside. I did an entire review of Dead Inside. You can watch it. If I remember, I will put it here in the corner. Go. If you really want to know what this terrible book was about, please go look that up. Yinka, Where's Your Husband was funny. It was funny and smart, and it was just a good time. Like, it was a good time, contemporary, about how we change ourselves to try to be in relationships, the pressures we have from external forces like our family and societal pressures to be in a relationship and to hit certain milestones in our lives. Otherwise, like, what's the point of it all, right? So this was really good. It was really funny, but also really smart, like I said. So there was more to it than just being like contemporary or having a romance or any of that. There was a nice message there about like, actually, like, it's okay for you to be yourself. Like, you don't have to do everything society tells you to do, or like your social like group wants you to do. You can do what makes you happy. Child to Youth Dependency was the first Tove Divelson. I can't say words. We all know this. We know I can't say words. And this was interesting. I've talked about it a few times in different vlogs and stuff, and I will start vlogging again. I'm sorry. I just haven't been in the mood. It's like, what am I going to show you? I'm just crying and going to work and reading. Not going to vlog that. So it's a first person narrative, right? And there's a first person narrative, literary sort of memoir about the author. And in childhood, she is not an adult speaking on her childhood. She is a child speaking on the things she sees around her. And she grows up as a narrator as you're reading the book. And it's very well done. But then at the same time, it was kind of frustrating to read it when she's in a child until she gets like further along in youth, because her perspective is so limited because she's a child. So like, one, yes, it is brilliantly written. So I will read more from this author, because the way that she crafts this story and the things that frustrate me because of her excellence of craftsmanship. So there's that. But I really, really, really liked adulthood when she came into her own and she could actually talk more eloquently and explicitly about the things that were going on and how she dealt with her addictions and all this stuff. So this was a fascinating and really interesting story by the end, but I do have to say that it took me a little while getting through the narrator growing up before I really was able to connect with the story, and that was just a me thing, I guess. The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World was sort of meh. Like, I guess it's fine. I guess if you're going through grief, if you've recently lost somebody, this would be a really good book to read because it is so simple in its discussion of grief and people that we've lost. But there was there was a grit missing for me. So like, I just don't think it was like my book about grief like I wanted it to be. So that was kind of sad. I did read The Last White Man. This is my first one from him, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was a really interesting like thought experiment on what would happen if we all sort of became one race and that race was not white. But I wish it had been a full-length novel and not a novella, because it really just feels like a thought experiment and less so like a fully realized narrative story, if that makes any sense. But it was really good. I'm not going to take anything away from it there. It was really good. For funsies, I read volume 2 of Lore Olympus. I have volume 3 on pre-order and 4 on pre-order, and I cannot wait for both of those to come out. Do love me some Lore Olympus. Violet by Kyung-Suk Shin is a very quiet and powerful book about being kind of lost and trying to make your way in the world, particularly as a woman, particularly in like a very patriarchal society. There's a really, really, really violent thing that happens on the page, and it's so far into the book that it was so shocking. But this book was so good, and the afterword that was printed with this, aces. Anton Her, I feel like he's the translator for Violet, And Anton Her, I would love to interview this gentleman. Naomi and I talk about it all the time, but I want to interview Anton Her because the way they translate is fantastic and the things they translate are fantastic. And I just want to know more about like how do you get here? And then what are you writing on your own? Because there is an element of like, it's not like translators also have to be like writers at the same time, right? Because they have to take words, then not all words directly translate into other words in another language. And you have to like use the language you're translating to like craft the meaning and the thought and the feeling behind the sentences that you're translating. I don't know if any of this makes sense. I'm like waxing poetic here, but the Hacienda was a fantastic Gothic novel with a forbidden romance. If you would like something for spooky season, please read this because I think you will enjoy it. Same with Tender as the Flesh, but so many trigger warnings with Tender as the Flesh. It's a lot, but it's good. And it's also a really interesting discussion on like humanity. And I'm really loving Argentine authors right now. This is a theme that I think is going to continue for a while, that like Argentine authors are fantastic. So that's everything that I kind of read, but then let's talk about the things that I pulled out to just really note for you guys, for us to go a little bit more in depth. So first up is actually like, it's kind of a cheat because it's 2 books, but it's all part of another book or a series. So I have been reading through Death Note, as we've discussed a few times, and I finished volumes 1 and 2 in August. I have to get back to volume 3. I've been focusing on a bunch of books for this book prize in September that I needed to finish by the end of September. So my reading has been different in September. We'll talk about it when we get there. Not bad, but it's been a little different. And also I've been distracted by other manga, but that's the point. So Death Note is just really fun. It's very emo. It's sort of classic, like I feel like entry-level manga because everybody talks about it, everybody knows it. It has like anime. Death Note is a phenomenon. I really enjoy it. I love the cat and mouse. I love how like clever it is for anybody who for some reason doesn't know what Death Note is. So you have this young boy and he like finds Death Note, which is basically like this book. And if you write somebody's name in this book and you can picture them, you can write them in this book and they like just die of a heart attack. But if you write them in the book and then within a certain amount of time write down more information about how they died, they'll die in that way. So this teenage boy finds this. And his dad's like the chief of police or something. And so he like takes it upon himself to take out all these like really bad criminals. And then this guy, L, who's like this secret person that works with the police, like a la like a Sherlock, gets brought in because these people keep dropping dead, all these criminals. And like everyone catches on. And then like some FBI agents get murdered. And it's just this cat and mouse game between L and the kid. And there's also this like demon, death demon that is like attached to the Death Note and only the kid can see him. Nobody else can see him, but it's fun. It's really just a fun time trying to watch these 2 characters try to like elude each other, one to elude and one to find the other. And it's such a good time. It's so clever. It's so fun. It's so emo. It's so a vibe and I love it. I absolutely love it. Other things I loved, and I do have a full review filmed for this, which I might put up. Let me know if you want a more robust review of this. But I also read Catherine M. Valenti's The Glasstown Game. Catherine M. Valenti wrote a couple small novellas for tour recently. The Past is Red, Comfort Me with Apples. Both very good, very different voices in them. And then there's this, which I just randomly found on Pango and I had to buy it. So Glasstown Game is about the Bronte children. And this is like a middle grade novel about the Bronte children. It is full of puns. It is full of little historical sort of factoids, nerdy factoids about the Brontes, about the world that they lived in. So basically the Bronte children, 2 of them are going off to school. The daughters are going off to school, the eldest 2. And then Anne and Branwell are bringing them to the train station so that they can go to school. And on the way there, when they get to the train station, they like enter this alternate world, which is very similar to the world that they create when they play with their toy soldiers and all this other stuff. So they kind of get stuck in Glasstown, which is this town they made up when they would play at home. And through going through this town and doing all this, they deal with the grief of losing their mom, the grief of losing 2 of their other siblings. You see them figure out who they are. You see just how like clever and interesting some of them are. Actually, all three of the sisters are. You see how sort of jealous Branwell is, and you really get this, really? How many times can I say really? You get this fantastic, fun breakdown of who the Brontes are. Like, instead of watching some PBS documentary about who the Brontes are, you could read this and you would get such a nice little sliver glimpse into who each Bronte child is, and understand how they went from being like dreaming children to the people that they are. And you see it's just so much fun, and there's really fun drawings throughout, like, and it's like one of these like literal, and it's a very literal world. So like Napoleon was called Old Boney, and when they meet Napoleon, Napoleon is a bag of bones. And it's my kind of like punny humor. It's the kind of book that if I was a child, I would have devoured this book, because I grew up watching, like, on PBS, the BBC mini series, all the Jane Austens, of Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, all these stories that I then, as I got older, went on to read and fell in love with. And these authors that I have loved since I was a child, because these are people that my mother really loved. And so these are some of the authors that are like at the base of like why I am a reader, and here we are today talking about books all the time. It's a complex reason why somebody would end up devoting their entire life to something like this, but this is part of it. This is a key to it. So it just felt like this really nostalgic romp through a magical, childlike land. And I adored it. I thought it was fantastic. And I never hear anybody really talk about it anywhere in the bookish space. And so I just thought, I'm going to highlight this book because it's good. This one I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because we did an entire live on it, and you can watch the live. I'll try to remember to link it. I probably will forget, but I'll try to remember to link it. Otherwise, you can just find it on our channel. It's in the lives. It's there. On my channel, it's there. So this is Elena Knows by Claudio Pinheiro. Jesus isn't here to hear me butcher his mother tongue. This is a fantastic novel that is described to us as a mystery. It is a mother trying to figure out how her daughter died, because she doesn't believe that she died by unaliving herself. She just cannot believe it, because there's no way that she would have left her house on that day because it is raining. So she is determined to get to this one woman who she believes can help her. And the mother has very advanced, very severe Parkinson's. So the day is split up between her taking her medicines throughout the day, because just around the time that one pill is waning, the other, and she takes the next pill and it's taking effect, she's sort of like at the mercy of her disease. And she has to complete certain things before she gets to this period where one drug is dipping and she can take the next drug. She can't just like she has to take them at very specific times. Otherwise, the medicine could make her very sick too. So it is this constant struggle of watching this woman get from her home to this other woman's home, which is actually not a terrible journey, but when you have Parkinson's is an incredibly hard journey to do in Buenos Aires. And her reflections back on her daughter, her reflections back on their life together. And Elena's not a very likable character, but I also like her, if that makes any sense. And it's a very moving book. It's a very good book. I really recommend that you read it. And then make sure you read the afterword, because it talks a lot about who this author is. It talks a lot about this book. And it talks a lot about like what this book is at its core. It's not a mystery. It's a book about women's rights. And if you don't know, Argentina did not get bodily autonomy for women until like 2020 is when they where abortion was made legal. Which is weird now that here we are in 2022 and we would look at Argentina and think that we are so much better than them as Americans. And we can go down a whole rant of how like our rights are not. Anyway, so good. Amazing. I need more of her works to be translated into English. This is again in that I am falling in love with Argentine authors. So please read this. And you can see like our whole discussion if you want like more breakdown of stuff. And we tried not to spoil like the really big reveals for you. So there might be some spoiling of things, but the big stuff isn't. Then I have another tiny, tiny little book, and this is Icelandic, and this is Magma. And this book I've talked about a couple times, I feel like, so I'm not going to go in depth about it. But this is a very small book about a girl who gets into this emotionally abusive relationship and sort of her inner thoughts and struggles while she's in this relationship. And it just hits home so hard. If you've ever been in an emotionally abusive relationship, you will maybe not want to read this. I don't know. That's going to depend on how you are with triggers, but it hits home and it hits so many, it reminded me of so many things, so many feelings, so many moments. And this is something that I think we talk about it more now, but I think it's something that we don't talk about all the time. Sometimes like physical violence is easier to accept or easier to discuss because there's physical evidence of it and you cannot deny, like there's no deniability when you have like a black eye or broken ribs or something like that. But when the wounds are inside and really only you know those wounds are there, if you even realize they're there or not at the time, those emotionally abusive relationships are sometimes just the most difficult to get out of, to notice, to deal with, to get other people to believe you about. Any abuse is bad. There is no real hierarchy of abuse, but it's a very interesting and sad, in its own special way, sad kind of abuse. The author is first a poet, and this is her first novel, I believe, and you can see how her mastery of like poetic language, you can see it in here. So I really would be interested in reading her poetry collections. It's really good. It's really sad. It's quite a ride. Definitely a lot of triggers. A lot of these have some triggers, so look them up. Love this. There's a few flags in here too. It's super short. Like some of these chapters only have like a few sentences on them. It's so good. So worth it. Hey, so I'm editing this video and I realized I totally didn't talk about one of my notable reads. So one of my notable reads was The Employees by Olga Ravin. I don't know how to say her name. This book was so good. So this is longlisted for the Ursula K. Le Guin Book Prize for sci-fi literature, and it was so weird and bizarre and just amazing. So The Employees was fantastic. It's a really bizarre book. I've talked about it a bunch. It is set up in a series of like almost like witness statements, like HR statements, employee statements, and they're just various statements from the different employees on this spaceship. Something has happened on the spaceship. There's these weird like egg-like rock creatures that seem to make people have feelings and thoughts and sensations. They're strange, they're weird. Something is going on. Some people have left the ship and they don't really explain it. There's humans and humanoids on this ship. There's definitely a lot of contention between the two like groups, but not really. Is it real contention? Is it like manufactured contention? You don't know. There's some beautifully poetic moments where the humanoids are discussing what does it mean to be alive and what does it mean to be human. And the ending has like a nice kick right at the end that twists and just is so, it's really good. It's a really good book and weird, and it's not for everybody. The structure is so strange. And it's like a detective story that's being laid out for you, like clue by clue by clue by clue. So you don't know what the hell is happening most of the time, but you want to know what the hell is happening. You want to know, so you keep reading it, and as it's getting unfolded, you're just getting more and more invested because you just want to freaking know. So when it finally find it out, it's so good. It's such a good weird book that I need to get for my shelves because it's so freaking weird and I loved it. And like, yeah, I like weirdly structured, well-written, weirdly structured books, and this definitely fits the bill. So we're gonna get back to the rest of like my video. I don't know what this is. And then finally is a book that I didn't shut up about in the beginning of August because I was obsessed, and we're going to talk about it just very briefly because I talked about it so much, and that is The Eighth Life. I don't know if this is translated from Georgian or German because the author writes in both, but she's a Georgian author who lives in Germany and speaks both, so I have no idea. So if anybody knows what this was originally written in, please let me know. But this behemoth is one hell of a family saga, which I don't read a lot of family sagas, but when I do, I love them. This is arguably the largest book I've ever read, and it was just so dang good. This book is so powerful. It's such an interesting way to look at history from the Russian Revolution to like almost today in Georgia, like through the lens of all these women and family members in this family. There's a lot of like brokenness in this family, and there's a lot of sort of generational trauma and things, but there's also a lot of incredibly powerful and brilliant women that kind of keep the family together. There's a lot of non-traditional women that kind of keep the family together. And I just thought it was so beautiful and so wonderful. And I know it's kind of scary. Like a lot of people, when I started reading this or when I've posted about this, I often get somebody in the comments that's like, oh, I want to read it, but it's so big, or like big books scare me, or like it's just so chunky, or like any derivation of that comment. And honestly, get the audiobook. It's on Scribd. Scribd goes faster than 2 times now. They finally have gotten with the time. The audiobook's on Scribd. Get the audiobook and just listen to it. Make it your driving book. Make it your cleaning the house book, and just listen to all of this. Don't even look at the pages. Don't even psych yourself out with that. Just make it your audiobook for doing things. I just feel like you're going to get wrapped up in the story. I mean, I would be driving listening to this, and I would be like this driving my car because I was like on edge reading it. It was so stinking good. I absolutely love this book so much. Please read it. I don't know why I'm spanking it. Read the book. Just check the time on this, or like over 30 minutes. This is a very long video of me discussing all the books I read in August. If you want to check out more about my women in translation reads and some of the other things I did individual reviews on, there's a whole playlist of reviews. There's the playlist for the podcast if you want to see what we talked about in our podcast episodes about these books. Otherwise, I'm going to shut up because I don't know what my camera and everything is doing. And I also kind of got to get this edited because there's a lot to edit. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye. So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever want to go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think we were meant to be.